Hello and welcome to the career simulation of Gabriel Perreault. At the start of his career, since the USHL is not in this game, Perreault would be playing on the first line of the Boston College Eagles of the NCAA College Hockey League. Also, quick disclaimer. The NCAA will no longer be in any career simulations until HLM23 comes out on September 9th. In his draft year, Perreault would play 32 games and in those 32 games would score 34 points, and his draft rankings is now up to 26. Boston would make the playoffs, placing 6th in the league. In the second round of the playoffs, St. Thomas would eliminate Boston 3-2 in the second round. In 2 playoff games, Perreault would score 2 points in 2 games. In the draft lottery, the Canadiens and the Maple Leafs have the best odds at getting the first overall pick. At the end of the draft lottery, the number 1 spot would go to Dallas and Montreal would drop 1 spot to 2. With the 28th overall pick, Perreault would go to the Rangers, just like in real life. Also, Gabe is revealed to be a 68 overall with top 6 potential. In the off-season, Perreault would not receive a contract, but he is now up to a 74 overall. Perreault would be on the first line of the Boston College Eagles once again. At the end of the season, Perreault would play another 32 games and score 44 points. Also, Perreault would take a World Juniors Championship with America. Boston would finish 23rd and would barely make the playoffs. In the wild card round, though, Boston would be eliminated to Vermont in a 4-3 game. Also, Gabriel would score 1 point in 1 game. But good news, as his team that drafted him, the New York Rangers, would win the 2024 Stanley Cup. Perreault is also now a 77 overall and still without a contract. Perreault would go on to play with the Brandon Wheat Kings of the WHL, though on the first center line. In 68 games, Perreault would prove that his greatness as a prospect, as in 68 games Perreault would put up 152 points. Brandon would also finish first in the WHL. At the end of the 2024-2025 season, the Brandon Wheat Kings would win the Ed Chynoweth Cup in 14 games. Perreault would also put up 27 points. He would take home the 4 Broncos Memorial Trophy, the WHL Playoffs MVP, and the Offensive Player of the Year. Perreault would once again not get a contract and is still unfortunately a 77. In 63 games played, Gabriel would score 123 points on the season. The Wheat Kings would also finish second in the league. In the finals, the Kelowna Rockets would eliminate Brandon in 5 games. In 14 games, Perreault would score 13 points. Perreault would finally get a contract on 3 years worth $997,000. He is still a 77, but this time Perreault would be playing for the Wolfpack of the AHL on the second right wing line. Perreault would play 28 games with the Rangers and would score 4 points, but in the AHL would play 20 games and would score 18 points. Perreault would finally crack the Rangers roster on the 4th right winger line. Also, the screenshot was taken during 2027 season, not the 2028 season, so I forgot to mention that. He is now an 81 overall. The Rangers would finish 13th in the league and would make the playoffs. In the second round of the playoffs, the Flyers would take down the Rangers in a sweep. Perreault would play 10 games with only 1 point on the playoffs. In the second year of his first NHL contract, Perreault is now an 83. Perreault would play his first full season and would score 27 points. The Rangers would finish 4th and would make the playoffs. The Rags would make it all the way to the finals, but the Flames would eliminate the Rangers in a sweep. In the playoffs, Perreault would play 20 games with 11 points on the season. In the last year of his rookie contract, Perreault is sitting at an 86 overall. In 77 games, Perreault would score 36 points on the season and the Rangers would make the playoffs, finishing 4th in the league. In the second round, the Pens would eliminate the Rangers in 7 games. In 11 games, Perreault would score 4 points. We would see Perreault enter free agency for the first time as a qualified RFA. Perreault would sign with the Devils on a 5-year $6.1 million deal. Also, he didn't sign, he got traded. Here's the details, pause to read if you'd like. In 70 games, Perreault would score 59 points. The Devils would finish 6th in the league. In the first round of the playoffs, Perreault's former team, the Rangers, would eliminate Perreault's Devils in 6 games. In 4 games, Perreault would score 2 points on the playoffs. He is still an 86. In his second year with his new team, Perreault would only play 43 games with 29 points on the season. The Devils would finish 12th in the league and would make the playoffs. In the second round, the Blue Jackets would eliminate the Devils in 6. In 13 games, Perreault would only score 3 points. He is still an 86 once again. In a full season, Perreault would score a career-high 70 points this season. The Devils would finish 10th in the league. The Devils would make it to the finals, but the Stars would eliminate the Devils in 6 games. In 22 games, Perreault scored 18 points. Perreault would reach maximum potential as an 87 overall. Perreault would score 67 points in 82 games as well. The Devils would finish 6th in the league at the end of the season. The Devils would finally win a cup for Gabriel Perreault and their first one since 2003, 30 years later in 5 games to the same team. They won against all the way back in 2003. Anyway, I'm 23 games. Perreault would score 15 points. Now 28 years old, Perreault is entering his last year of his Devils deal, sitting at an 86. Let's see if he resigns. At the trade deadline, Perreault would be traded back to the Rangers, and in 66 games with the Devils, Perreault would score 53 points, but with the Rangers would play 17 games with 18 points for a combined 71 points, also for a new career high. Also, here's the trade details. Pause to read if you'd like. The Rangers would miss the playoffs, though, placing 29th in the league. Perreault looks like he is here to stay in year 11 as he signs for a 6-year deal for $7.1 million. Also, he is now an 87 again. In 80 games, Perreault would also score 60 points. In his 30s, Perreault is back down to an 86. Perreault would play a 79-game season with 65 points on this season. The Rangers would finish 18th in the league and would sadly miss the playoffs. He is still an 86. In 76 games, Perreault would score 62 points. The Rangers would place 11th in the league. In the first round, the Canes would eliminate the Rags in 6 games. In 6 games, Perreault would score 3 points. Perreault would unfortunately finally see some regression as he is down to an 85. In 75 games, Perreault would score 53 points. The Rangers would finish 10th and would make the playoffs. In 7 games, the Sabres would eliminate the Rangers in 7 games. In 13 games, Perreault would score 9 points. Perreault would be bought out by New York in year 16. The Rangers would buy out Perreault and would sign with the Coyotes on a 3-year deal for $6.2 million contract deal. In 82 games, Perreault would score 64 points. Arizona would finish 28th in the league and would obviously miss the playoffs. In what could be his last year in Perreault's career, he is now down to an 83. In 77 games, Perreault would score 48 points. The Coyotes would finish 18th and miss the playoffs. In his last year of his 3-year Coyotes contract, Perreault is now an 80 overall. In 82 games, Perreault would only put up 21 points. The Coyotes would just barely make the playoffs, finishing 17th. Perreault would resign with the Coyotes on a 2-year for $1 million. Also, he is now a 77. Perreault would play 38 games with the Coyotes and 27 with Tucson and would put up 4 points with the Coyotes and 45 with the Roadrunners. Arizona would finish 26th and would miss the playoffs. At the age of 37, Gabriel Perreault would retire. Here are his stats. Pause to read if you'd like. Hope you enjoyed this video. Goodbye.